Ho Chi Minh City. So it's a long flight over there, and I'll be en route next Wednesday. So I'm hoping to meet next Friday, and I think Raphael will let you know if there's any new scheduled time. But if we meet at 1 p or 6 p.m. your time, that's 1 a.m. in Ho Chi Minh City. So I think with jet lag, we'll be able to accomplish that. So I'll talk to when I arrive in Ho Chi Minh City next week. I'll talk to Raphael and we'll get something set up. But next Wednesday we would not be able to meet. So anyway, we ended up on Wednesday talking about the increasing capacity. Clearly, if you had a system where you just had several voice channels, and let's say you had 10 or 12 or however many, once those are used up, that's it. No one else can get on and can use the system, because again, it takes radio frequency for this whole thing to work. So you need to increase capacity, either to get increased or more bandwidth, or to just improve the way you modulate the radio signal, maybe somehow share it, or reuse frequency. And that's the real key, is this you reusing frequency. If you don't emit as much power here, if you blast power out here, it's going to bleed over to here. But if you limit the power here, the frequencies that are assigned to that area, which is called a cell, could be used at some other distance. Now remember, radio waves don't follow a neat hexagon. Radio waves are very imperfect, but again, and sometimes they bleed over from cell to cell. So you would not want to use the same radio frequencies, let's say in this cell right in here, because again, at the edge of the cell, at the edge of the perimeter there of that cell, you could bleed over into someone else's radio signal. So let's take a look at cellular. There's some concepts of cellulars. There's the actual cells themselves, which, like we said, are not neat hexagons. They're drawn like this because it allows for nice interlocking and kind of to visualize what area these different frequencies are used. And then you need to reuse frequencies at some distance. There's handover intra-system. Now, intra-system handover means you're staying within this mobile switch. Out here in the core network, there's a switch called the Mobile Switching Center, or MSC. That mobile switching center is going to be controlling, and the radio out here also will do some of the control. So that's going to control as you go from here to here, you're going to be changed and assigned a different frequency, a different channel. Same thing as you move from here to here, but you're staying within this mobile switch. But let's say now you drive from here and you drive out into the country, and now you're into cells that are controlled by another mobile switch. But you need to communicate that over a dedicated circuit, a dedicated path. So that's called inter-system handover or handoff. So the cells themselves, typically, at least in the early systems, cells were placed in what was known as a 7-cell reuse pattern. You took the total number of frequencies, and let's say you had 300 frequencies, 300 different channels. And these channels can vary maybe 25 kilohertz wide. That's how wide. You need some amount of channel spacing, to actually talk so your voice can be heard. So we're typically 25 kilohertz. And you would need two channels, one going from your mobile phone up to the radio, and one going from the radio back down to your mobile phone. The one from the mobile phone to the radio tower is called the uplink, and from the radio tower back down to you is the downlink. So it takes two different channels so you can talk in a duplex manner. Well, if you had, let's say, 300 total of these 25 kilohertz channels, well, you really only have 150 because they're duplex. You need two of them for each conversation. Some of them you would need for control also. Some of these frequencies is where the cell tower is actually talking to the radio, taking measurements and things like that. So you need some control frequencies. But if you divided up the total number of duplex frequencies that you had, and you put 1/7 of them here, and 1/7 of them here, and 1/7 in 3, and then in 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. This is your 7-cell reuse pattern. And you could reuse certain frequencies here at some distance away. So this at least early on, was a very typical cell pattern called the 7-cell reuse pattern. And that just says that you divide up. Now, again, don't think that they just took exactly 1/7 in each one of these. It depends on where the populations are. It depends on if there's a market or a shopping mall in one of these, you're going to have more radio frequencies as more people are talking on the phone. Also, these cells are not always geographic the same amount. Again, you don't the same distance. Again, if you're in a major motorway and you're out in the country and you're traveling along at 50, 60 kilometers, well, these cells have to be fairly large. But if your cells are in a downtown, in a city area where it's mostly foot traffic and people are walking, well, again, you don't need large cells because you can have smaller cells because people aren't moving as quick. So again, we're just looking at the principles here of cellular communication. So some of these cells are pretty large. They can be up to 30 kilometers. Now, again, that takes a lot of power here to go this 30 kilometers. And sometimes it's you see cells drawn like this, but typically your radio tower is not in the middle of a cell. Usually it's more like this, where that radio tower has a 120-degree sector here, 120-degree sector here, and 120-degree sector here. So one radio tower is covering 3 different cells. You don't have them in the center. You need many, many more radio towers. But some of these cells, again, out in the countryside or where there's maybe a major motorway where traffic is going fast, these cells need to be fairly large. Some of these can be fairly small, maybe in a area where it's mostly residential. People are maybe driving in cars, but they're not driving all that fast. You can have some of these microcells that can cover maybe 1.5 to 2 kilometers. You can have smaller cells, which this is more like foot traffic. This is more where people are moving, but not as quick. So again, the cell, they can control the movement much easier than if it was a larger cell. And then you can have very small cells. These could be inside of an office. These could be where people are barely moving at all. Maybe a sporting arena or a sporting event where people are not really moving around at all. They're just concentrating in that one cell. So again, there's just different concepts of cells. These are not always the same size at all. And then how far apart on a 7-cell reuse pattern can you reuse frequencies? Well, not everything today. Today, there's much different modulation, and not everything is this neat 7-cell reuse. But initially when cellular came out, it had this reuse pattern, which was typically 7 cells. Let's just take a look at these 7 cells here. And let's just, for the sake of communication, now let's just for the sake of talking, let's just say you put 1/7 of your total frequencies in each one. So if you had 400 channels, 400 simplex channels, you had 200 duplex channels, 1/7 of those would be here, 1/7 roughly here, 1/7, and so on. We're just gonna kind of do that just so we can visualize this. Now, and we'll use this radius here, even though the cell tower is not in the center, we can still use this as a kind of just a way to look at how much power you're going to emit. Because if you have a real small cell, if you have one of these femto cells or pico cells down here, you don't need a lot of power. However, if you're in a major, out in the countryside, you might need to, in order to get 30 kilometer size cells, you need to emit more power. So it's directly related to the amount of power. And we can go through the mathematical formulas. I've forgotten more about it than I remember doing these formulas years ago. But if you look at the radius, which is going to be determined by how much you emit, how much power you emit. The reuse number, we're going to call that 7-cell. Again, it's different in many cases today, but this is just a good reference. So the reuse number is 7, and then the distance. The distance, how far can we go in order to reuse those exact same frequencies that are used here, reuse them here? Well, it comes out as D is the square root of 3 times that number of the cell pattern times the amount of power, that radius. And it comes out to be 4.6 times the radius. So that distance then is going to be roughly 4.6 times that radius. So it comes out to be roughly 4.6 times then the power. So you can reuse that pattern at roughly, and depending on your power, multiply that times 4.6, and that many kilometers. It could be miles. That's the distance away. It depends on what your distance you're using, what your whether miles or kilometers. So if you multiply 4.6 times whatever this radius is here, you can reuse this. So theoretically, if you reduce the power, you reduce the cell, and you reduce the distance that you can go from here to reuse those same frequencies again. But again, you got to understand, not everything is equal. The foot traffic downtown, downtown Accra, where people are just walking and bumping into each other, and they're not moving very fast, is much, much different than someone on a motorway going 60, 70, 80, 90 kilometers, where you can't have a real small cell here because the system couldn't keep up with you as you go from cell to cell to cell to cell to cell. So again, this is we're just looking at overall concepts, and that's the frequency reuse part of it. When we look at handing over, and it's different today because today your mobile phones are much more involved in taking measurements. They're constantly aware of the signal strength that they're listening to. Okay, in the earlier systems, it was more the network, that the switch was actually telling the cell tower, hey, take a measurement of this subscriber right here. So if you were engaged in a call, and let's say this person out here, this is a term, this PSTN, public switched telephone network. It just means the wireline network. It's just a kind of a common telecom term for wireline. If someone calls you, and it could be even another mobile phone, but if someone calls you, that's going to terminate at the mobile switch. And then the mobile switch is going to page you, and now it's assigned a radio frequency. We'll go over more of these steps later, but it assigns you a radio frequency. Now you're talking to your friend over here, and you're walking down the road, or you're driving in your car, and you get to the edge of the cell. Well, the signal strength here is getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And as it gets weaker and weaker, the system, the switch and the cell tower is going to tell the mobile, hey, I want you to take some some measurements on the radio signal of some of the neighbors here. So it does. It measures this signal strength here and says, hey, there's a pretty good one right here, and reports that back. The mobile switch, in conjunction with the radio system, will command the mobile to retune to a frequency. In other words, you're on a channel right here. I want you to retune your mobile to a new frequency because you're wandering right here. You're coming at the edge of the cell. And again, radio waves kind of bleed in here. These radio waves will bleed in here. They don't follow a neat hexagon like it shows here. But it does show us that how these interlocking cells work, and just gives us the concept of cellular. So that's an intra-system handoff. Now, here's the key thing. The call is in progress. If your phone was idle, if it was in your pocket, if you were on the seat of your car, or you're driving or whatever, if you were not talking to someone on the phone or using your phone in any way, this would not occur. Why? Because you don't have a radio channel. The mobile is in contact. There's control frequencies here. The mobile is in contact, so the system knows where you're at, but you're not assigned a voice channel. A call has to be in progress. You have to be talking to someone in order to be handed off to another voice channel. So the switch would measure the signal strength. Oh, we got a hand. Yes, Benjamin.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I wanted to come in with a question where, so there are instances where I do go for long walks a lot, and a lot of the times I don't make calls or anything, but I listen to music, right? and it's online. So maybe I'm streaming a song, but
Mhm.
then because I'm working over a larger distance, a lot of the times get um, I don't get disconnected from the network, so to speak. Like I get
Mhm.
a constant service. So why I'm asking this question is we were talking about voice.
You're breaking up there. You're breaking up.
Is
I
it better
heard you up
now?
until a minute ago.
Is it better now?
Yeah, that's better.
Yes. I'm asking in a case where I'm not actively making a voice call, or I'm not like on my phone texting or anything, but I'm still using the network, the internet. I'm still using the internet. Does that also count in this instance?
Good question. As it turns out, if you use your phone and the internet, you have a different protocol. It's called GTP. It's called GPRS tunneling protocol. So it's a basically a packet within a packet, and you're using that tunneling protocol to listen to or to use the internet. This part here would strictly be for voice. We will talk more about GTP, but that's a very good question. When you use your phone for data, it's a different concept. It uses what's known as a tunneling protocol. VPNs are tunneling protocols. That's where you have a packet within a packet. So you have an outside packet and then a packet inside there. Well, when you're listening to the something on the internet or you're doing data, your your inside packet is your actual data. The outside packet is the pipe that's actually carrying that information there. So it's not the same concept as this.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and we'll talk more. That's an excellent question.
Yes, sir.
And we will talk more about that. Absolutely. So once you check the signal strength of your neighbor, you get assigned a new channel. This is for voice now. I'm glad you brought that up because we'll distinguish that. This is for voice. And then it commands the mobile onto a new frequency. It works again different with data, but you get a new frequency. And now you're assigned here. Now that's intra-system handover. There's also inter-system handover, and that occurs here. That occurs where you're talking to someone here. You're under control of a radio tower here, controlled by this switch. But now you come to the edge of a network. This might be the edge of a mobile network. Maybe it's the edge of a country. Maybe you're going from one country to another country. You're moving from one network to another network, and you're engaged in a call. If you're engaged in a call, this becomes inter-system handover. Well, now this switch here doesn't control that cell tower. That cell tower is controlled by a different mobile switching center. So now this switch has to send a telecom signal over here, asking this switch to ask it to take a measurement from here to measure the signal strength of this mobile. And if the signal strength is satisfactory, then this switch will set up a voice path, and that voice path would get set up. And your total path that you would communicate would be from this mobile from here. You'd be talking on that voice path to the mobile switch. You'd be talking on that voice path to this switch, and then you'd continue to talk. Now, this only applies though if you're on your phone. If your phone is idle and you move from one network to another network, that's an update location. That is a totally different thing. For intra-system handover, if you move from one cell to another cell and you're not engaged in a call, nothing happens. The system just says, okay, you're now here. It doesn't assign anything because you're not assigned anything. If you're not engaged in a call here, there's no radio channel, there's no voice channel. So you merely get deregistered here and re-registered here, assuming that these two networks have a roaming agreement, that there are two different networks. But it could be the same company. It could be, let's say, MTN. Let's say it's MTN in Ghana. I'm not sure, is that one of the cell companies, but let's say it is MTN in Ghana. Well, they have more than one switch in their network. So you might be driving from the downtown, an area where you're at now. Maybe you're driving home and you live some distance away. Well, there's different switches. They have multiple switches. So when you go from this switch over to this switch, that would also be an inter-system handover, assuming that you're talking on the phone when this happens. If you're not talking on the phone and you're downtown right now where you're at, you're currently registered. It's called an update location. You're registered on this switch. But then as you drive home, you come over here. If you're not engaged in a call, the system will de-register you here and re-register you here. So those are just some of the concepts for inter and intra-system handover. Again, we're just talking concepts here. In the same system. So those cells are controlled. All the cells that are controlled by one mobile switch would be intra-system, handed over from cell to cell to cell, and those cells are under control of one switch. And those are that's a geographic area. Let's say the city center where you're at now. Let's say that's one area. Mm-hmm. Yes. Because you have to imagine, let's say Accra, let's say how many cells are there in Accra? There are probably thousands of them. Well, they would not all be under control of the same switch. There might be, maybe for the north side of the city, there'd be one switch that controls a couple hundred cells, and another switch in the center part of the city that controls another couple hundred, and maybe in the south. So just think of these cells, think of several hundred cells under control of a switch. So you have multiple switches because Accra is a very large city with a big population. Excellent. Excellent. Now, before we, and again, I've got to go here with a minute or two. Before we go, I want to just talk a little bit about this. This is where we're going to pick it up. We're going to pick it up next Friday, since I'll be traveling next Wednesday. Every system, I don't care if it's first generation, second generation, third generation, fourth generation, fifth generation, and soon to be someday sixth generation. There are three main parts, to any network. One is called the user equipment. That would be this right here. That could be a mobile phone, which in most cases it is. It could be a tablet. It could be a iPad. It could be a IoT device. It could be an IoT device that's measuring water pressure or looking at traffic signals or whatever. But that's a user equipment. That's on the end of the network. The other part is the RAN, the radio access network. That's going to vary depending on your generation. That's going to vary, and again, we'll talk more about that. But on this RAN, it talks radio to here, and it communicates with the core network. So it has to have a communication on this tower here to the core network, and it talks radio out here. The core network has to communicate with the wireline network called the public switched telephone network. It also has to communicate with other mobile networks. So you can call your friend. If you're on MTN Ghana and your other friend is on Vodafone, you need to talk to them. So they communicate with each other. But inside the mobile network, in order to make it mobile, that you can move around, you need certain databases, you need certain pieces of equipment. One is the mobile switch. And the mobile switch is looking, interpreting the digits you place in, it's keeping track of you. It just knows everything about you that it needs to just to keep you mobile. The other thing is it has a register that knows who is in this current switch. If your home switch is in the north of Accra and now you're in the center of Accra, your the visited system you're in now, the visited switch you're in now has a copy of your profile. It knows everything about you. It knows if you have any restrictions. It knows if you maybe you're not allowed to place a call to a certain international calls, or maybe you're restricted to do certain short message services. Whatever your services are, that system has a copy of it. It knows that. It keeps track of all the mobiles that are currently in this particular mobile switch. In other words, all the cells in that particular mobile switch, the visitor location register knows about it. Well, you have another register called the home location register. That's this device. The home location register is your central repository. It knows all of your services, plus it knows the switch where you currently are. So when you drive from your home in the north, let's say that's one switch. You drive from your home in the north, you drive to the city center. That's a different switch. The switch in the city center asks its visitor register, hey, do you know who this is? And the visitor register says, I don't know, but I'll go get some information. So it sends a data signal to the home register. It tells the home register, I need a copy of this subscriber's profile. Give me a copy of their profile, and here's where they're currently at. So the home register sends a copy of your profile to the visitor register. And the home register says, I know the switch where that customer currently is. I know that Raphael is now here. He's not in the home switch. He's in the switch here in the city center. I know that Benjamin is here now. So it knows, the home system knows where you're at. Why is that important? Because any service that needs to find you will go to that home register first. So if I send you a text message, that text message has to go to your home register and say, where are you at? If I pick up the phone and call you, make a voice call to you, we got to find what switch you're at. We got to find what mobile switching center you're at. So let's go to the home register first. So the home register is your central repository for all of your subscription information, plus it knows the switch where you're currently located. Very important device. Now, there's other databases out there, and we'll talk more about these in the future. Some that keep track of your hardware equipment, some that keep track of your authentication, some that when you type out a short message, it goes to this register, and then it goes out and finds the recipient. So there's a lot of different databases and registers to make a mobile phone work. And that's what in the future we're going to talk a lot about all of these. But these are the key ones. These are the key databases and registers in mobile systems. Now, I want to also caution you that as time goes on, as you get into a third generation, a fourth generation, a fifth generation, some of these names change, but the functions are still there. You still need to keep track of where this mobile is at. You still need to understand what services they have. So we will expand on this infinitely. And by the time we're done with this, you'll know these registers backwards and forward. Guarantee. That's a guarantee. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Let me stop sharing right here 1 second. And I'm going to put you back here. So here right now, you're in front of me. And thank you. Like I said, I'll be traveling next week. It's a long flight, Chicago to Taipei, Taipei to Vietnam. But yeah, I'll be en route next week. So I'll be, Raphael, I'll be in touch with you, and then we'll work out something for next Friday. Your 6 p.m., I've looked it up, your 6 p.m. in Accra is 1 a.m. in Vietnam. Well, we'll see. Let's talk, because at least for the first few days, I'm going to have jet lag. My internal body clock will be, I won't know whether to eat supper, go to bed, or brush my teeth. So I'll be fine. Okay. Okay. Absolutely. Okay. I'll be in touch with you next week then. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy your weekend, everyone. Good to see you.